All right, cool. Yeah, I've introduced myself a couple times this weekend, so I'll just keep doing it again. Hey, everybody. I hope you all are doing well. It's the end of the conference. I hope everybody had such a fantastic time, specifically at the CTF. We did a lot of work on that this year, and was pretty proud of how it turned out. So happy with that. Congratulations to our winning teams. But this is not about that. This is not about CTF. This is about something else that is near and dear to my heart. Something about Atomic Red Team. Just saying the words. Is anybody familiar? Like, has heard the word? Okay, a couple of people. Great. That's about the percentage I wanted. So, I hope you all are doing well. A little introduction for myself. My name is Steve Myrick. I am the manager of two teams at a company called Avalera. We're a sales tax software company in Durham. I am manager of the adversarial engineering team, which is our red team, and the DevSecOps team. I've been offensive security professional for about 8-ish years. I went straight, out of college and was doing some things at Fidelity Investments for a while, and has kind of jumped around a little bit since then. Like I did say, I organize with this part of the EverSec CTF. So a lot of the challenges, if you were banging your head against Drupal this weekend or something like that, then that was my fault. I'm sorry. And then I've been here actually for a while, since I was born. I know that's kind of a somewhat unique thing for this area. I know a lot of people come here from out of town, so I've been here for the whole time. Grew up in Nightdale, so happy to be here. All right, today we're going to be talking about a little bit about Atomic Red Team, a little bit about how that kind of parlays into efficiency, which is a word that I'm sure you all have heard this year at some point. And then often talking about a little bit of some tooling we can use, and MITRE ATT&CK, which is a little bit of like a pretext for what you need to understand for Atomic Red Team. So I think it's interesting. I think it's a good way to start these talks a little bit with a kind of like a problem statement, kind of what we're talking about, why it's important to be talking about these things. So I wrote a couple of user stories, which is I've been doing a lot this year. I wrote a couple of user stories to kind of explain the problem statement. So first one is, as an offensive security engineer, I want to be able to emulate realistic attack scenarios in order to highlight vulnerabilities to my client. If you were here this morning when you heard Dan talking about red teaming, there's some things there that will be very close to this. 2, as a defensive security engineer, a blue team person, I want to be able to track detections and alerting in order to understand my capabilities to identify real attacks. It doesn't matter if our red team is the most sophisticated red team in the market. If we do not have a team that is ready to respond to that in terms of detections and alerting, it does not matter. The red teaming is about, like Dan said, it's about detecting or testing processes and alerting protections, things like that. It's not necessarily just exploits. And as a security executive, I want to be able to visualize and track improvements to my security program in order to measure progress. Right? We are beholden to metrics. We are, as security professionals, we are people that need to be showing value to our company. Right? And everybody wants to do this at scale. Nobody, there's a ton of people here who work in a variety of companies, whether maybe you've got 5 people, which I don't know how many 5-person teams have a red team, but maybe you're a consultancy, maybe you are a 5-person consultancy, maybe you're a university, maybe you are a Fortune 500 company. Everybody has a level of scale that they want to do, that they want to be able to provide value. So, how many people have heard this word or heard this phrase this year? Anybody? Do more with less. So obviously we can talk about the the context of that and how good or bad it is, but I do want to take this as an opportunity, right? We are, there are market conditions that are making it difficult for people to, really pushing for efficiency in the market. But this is a really great way to just, like what we're going to be talking about today is showing a way for us to have a ton of value as a red teamer specifically, with very little resources. These are free tools that I'm going to be showing off. This is stuff that basically anybody of any skill level in the offensive security realm can do. So one more thing of context here, just 10,000-foot view of where we are and where we're going. So this is what I said. We need to be able to clearly communicate the actual impact of realistic adversarial emulation automatically across an entire enterprise to improve our security posture and monitor progress. That is basically what I said in these last couple slides. This is the thing that you would take to, if you're inspired at the end of the talk and you say, I want to do atomic red team, I want to run these tools and run these programs at my company. This is the thing that you would take to your executives, to your leadership. This is the problem statement and everything kind of built into one. So I think everybody can agree that this is something that is worth doing, value, right? So we're going to start with the MITRE ATT&CK framework. Again, hands. MITRE ATT&CK framework. Anybody familiar with the idea? Sweet, good. Hey, look, that's a significant part. So really, all this is it is a framework. It's a knowledge base of tactics and techniques. This is basically a way for us to talk the same language when we're talking about attacks, right? When we are talking about adversaries, either internal or external, we need to be able to map those to something where we can, show our detections. There is another kind of companion framework to this, MITRE Defend as well. That's a subject for another talk, but for blue teams, MITRE Defend is also another way to track kind of completion. So there's 14 tactics, 234 techniques, and over 400 sub-techniques, i.e. a ton of work. Over the past couple years, it continues to be updated. It's updated a couple times a year, so you'll occasionally see the IDs that are assigned to some of these things change over time. But it's used to understand and replicate adversary behavior for better defense strategies. So here's an example of it. It's kind of small, but the point is that there's a lot of them, right? You see here at the top the categories, the columns, reconnaissance, resource development, initial access, execution, persistence, privilege escalation, so on and so forth. Each of these has a number of techniques below it, and each of those has a bunch of sub-techniques. And so this is just kind of a way for us to all kind of speak the same language. You're looking at this. This is just another view of the same thing, but on the smaller columns on the right, or the bigger columns on the right, are the sub-techniques. And this is years of work. This is if you have a blue team whose goal is maybe eventually to be green on all of these techniques and sub-techniques, saying, yeah, we have perfect detection, alerting, blocking, all that, then that is years of work, and that is an incredibly mature team. So I would say that if you are tracking this, and we do the first part where we're going to test our assessment as a company, you're not going to see a lot of this. There's going to be a lot of red. There's going to be a lot of red here. There's going to be probably a little bit of yellow and very little green. But we work towards improving things over time. So this is potentially years of work for the blue team. Is it potentially years of work for the red team? Yes and no. What we're going to be talking about today is trying to reduce the amount of work in total for red team specifically. So breaking these down into a little bit more specifics. So a tactic. A tactic is the why. Why is somebody performing an action? You saw those columns there at the top that I just talked about. This is how we kind of categorize our techniques. So tactics are the groupings. So here's an example would be like reconnaissance. People are trying to gather information. Reconnaissance is always going to be your first kind of part of an engagement, whether it be external, you're doing external reconnaissance, or maybe you're taking some sort of internal, some internal information, doing like an insider threat type of engagement. There's different types of reconnaissance, so you would see different sub-techniques for that. Something like lateral movement, they're trying to move through the environment, or exfiltration, steal data. These are the kind of common categories that you see for different adversarial engagements. It facilitates strategy, planning, and defense prioritization by understanding the attacker goals. Maybe your company is really good at detecting lateral movement and exfiltration, maybe, or probably lateral movement and reconnaissance. People can detect scanning activity that's built into most of the SIM tools. You're going to have, things coming off of the EDR that are going to be very common, that will be very easy to detect. Maybe you're not good at exfiltration. Exfiltration's hard. Really good attackers can almost always get data out of a network. So it's like, how do we add layers of sophistication to that? So some of these may be more green than red. Some of these might be more red than green. So a technique underneath that is how somebody does the tactic. So you saw T195 here, active scanning, that would be a part of reconnaissance here. You see recon 043, 595, or 1595 active scanning is the how somebody does that. There's going to be multiple techniques under one tactic, and there's going to be multiple sub-techniques under every technique. Something like this would be adversaries often perform active reconnaissance scans, probing victim infrastructure with network traffic to gather information for targets, unlike passive reconnaissance that avoids direct interaction, right? You see a lot of this in the CTF as well. Like, you're going to go through and do active reconnaissance. You're going to be doing in-map scans. You're going to be doing you're doing Nessus scans against services, and then you're going to have things that you pick up in passive reconnaissance. That can be even something as simple as like documentation you find on a scoreboard or something. But there's plenty of different types of techniques here that we can talk about. But if you get down to the more granular piece of this, like a sub-technique is the very specific thing, and you could even break this down a little further if you want. There's probably multiple different methods of doing each of these sub-techniques. But for example, these three are underneath the one that you just saw previously, 1595, active scanning. Active scanning has three different sub-techniques. Those are the .001 or .002 of the active scanning tactic. So the first one, as an example, like scanning IP blocks. Scanning IP blocks, which are obviously ranges of sequential public addresses allocated to organizations to collect targeting information. Vulnerability scanning, wordless scanning. You're probably familiar with these, but there are various different things. Some are going to be more loud than others. Something like scanning IP blocks is kind of difficult to get real good detection alerting on because it's happening all the time. If you have something on the internet, it is being scanned at all hours of the day. Some people, I've heard, oh, we're going to go straight to blocking IPs that give us bad, that scan our systems. Well, that's not necessarily the perfect idea. I don't know if anybody has used like NordVPN or one of the VPN services where like you'll be using it legitimately and you'll have an IP that's shared with other people that may be malicious, and you go to a website and it just cuts you out. Like, I can't even load up the Tesla app on my phone with NordVPN on because it just does not load because they have blocked those IPs from NordVPN. So it can be a system that is, it can be a method that could be effective, sure, but it does have like user impact to it as well. Stuff like vulnerability scanning is slightly different. It's going to probably maybe show some more malicious activity, but again, those shared IPs can be very very dicey to scan and or to block immediately. So maybe something like alerting is going to be a little bit more your speed, maybe some speed bumps there. So a basic tool to get started, if you are, maybe you've been at a company for a while and maybe you are a blue teamer and you have no red team to test against or to test with. You might want to look at something like MITRE ATT&CK Navigator. It is a web app, and actually you can pull it up probably, that basically is just that heat map that you saw, and it gives you the ability to change the colors of the things for a pretty report. So great use of an afternoon to go through and put in here what you think is the state of your business at the given time. It's not perfect. It is web-based and open source and exportable. Like, it's, you can get exported files where you can carry this, from system to system, but it's not the most sophisticated tool. It's not easily extensible. It doesn't necessarily have like a lot of reporting features. Let's see if it loads. Actually, this is that page. So my good friend Jeff, I think, tore the Wi-Fi down during teardown for CTF. So we'll see how this goes. But as you see here, these are all of the. Am I not? Well, that would be important, right? Thank you. There you go. So Attack Navigator. So Attack Navigator is basically what you just saw earlier, just with the ability to change some of the colors and give a example of kind of where you think that the state of your organization is at a given point. You can add things like comments. If you say, I'm not really sure about this one, or maybe I'm really positive about this, you can add levels of confidence, comments, different things. for scaling and for colors. You can also export these, like I said. You can export them to either like report for an SVG, or you can actually export them out to just something that you save on your desktop, because this is a web app. If you're running this, like I said, it's open source software, so if you are running it by yourself, you can keep it persistent, but otherwise you can just keep the exports of this. So anyways, just a kind of easy way. This is straight up running on their GitHub. This is just a free version of that if you want to check it out. But we're going to be talking about a little bit more advanced tools here in a bit. That will be a little bit more fun. Good. So what are atomics? So we talked about MITRE ATT&CK framework. We understand what that is, how it tracks. What are atomics? Atomic Red Team is the project that's put on by Red Canary, I believe. This is their open source project. It is basically a collection of scripts. There are simple, actionable tests to emulate specific tactics or techniques used by adversaries. So all of those that you saw there just a minute ago, active scanning, IP scanning, wordless scanning, all of those have a specific script that is literally tied directly to the ID of that thing. So T.1105.001 has an atomic. An atomic is just a script. It is a thing that will simulate that attack and let people understand, did it work? Did it not? Do we have alerting? Do we have logging? Is this something that we can see? Is it something that we can block? And it also, like, most of them come with a cleanup. So if it's like somewhat destructive or does something to your system that you want to remove, like indicators afterwards, like sometimes they will have like cleanup pieces to the scripts as well. So they shouldn't really affect the system that much. They should just provide a kind of simple way for it to show whether or not this tactic or technique is valid, if it will execute on the machine, which gives us a great baseline for all the rest of our tests. So I said this is going to be, this is years worth of work, right? If you think of every tactic and every technique and every sub-technique, if each of those has a script and each of those are being run on a variety of systems, it's going to take a while for your blue team to come through and say, yes, I have alerting on this one. No, I don't have blocking on this one. And that is where we can, and also the fact that it is updated twice a year, you're probably going to get to, maybe you get 50 of them done and then they change. And then new techniques come out. You're going to have plenty of different ways to exploit these things. They are a practical method of simulating attacks, right? We don't have to necessarily, since they are pretty extensible, you don't necessarily need a red teamer to do these things. You can have a blue team run the scripts themselves. We'll talk more about like where a red teamer comes into this equation later on, but technically anybody could run these scripts. They're not that difficult to run. They're self-contained. You can pull them straight from their little website. We'll show how to do that, and they focus on a single technique. So focus is really important here, really being able to say this technique, this sub-technique, we have coverage for, yes or no. And they're easily executable with minimal setup, making them ideal for rapid testing. So if we think about this a bit, I mentioned scale earlier, right? I think everybody here understands that not every single system on a large enough network will have the same level of controls. You're going to have some that have different EDRs. You're going to have some that are missing detections. You're going to have some that behave differently. We really want to show coverage here with these as well, which makes it great because you can deploy them kind of across multiple different systems and see how they respond. Picking one system out of a network and throwing an atomic against it and saying, this is, it's green here, therefore my entire network is good against this one technique, is probably not an accurate representation of reality. So here's an example of a brute force T1110. So objective for that one, simulating an adversary by attempting a brute force attack on Active Directory accounts to assess the resilience of account lockup policies. So that one specifically has 8 different atomic tests. You see them listed out here. I'm not going to read all of them, but for example, brute force credentials of a single Active Directory domain using SMB, or pseudo brute force for Debian or Red Hat or FreeBSD. Those are different types of, each of those are their own scripts. Some of these may be available on like one OS or multiple OS depending on what they are. Obviously the ones here that are called out specifically for Debian will only work on Debian, but some that are a little bit more broad will have like a version that is for Mac OS or Linux or Windows. Some of them are the same. Some of them are the exact same type of technique regardless of operating system. So I took a screenshot here of one of the atomics here on GitHub. This is what you see here on the left. You see actually folders of the various techniques, and you see down here an example. It's not really the most, it's very very small, but you'll see the attack command, exactly what it is. This one is a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This one's 5 lines. It's a 5-line script. It's very simple. Some of these require network access, some don't. This one's FTP, so you would. But this one is showing exfiltration via encrypted FTP. This one also has a cleanup command as well, so it will get rid of the files that it creates or what have you. But basically, this is a way to test if it's simulating a encrypted file transfer to an FTP server. It tells you one that you can use here, and this one is specifically for Windows. So this is something that you could run against a example Windows machine. You would see if it executed correctly or if it did not. And then you would need to go into your EDR, or not your EDR, your SIM afterwards, or whatever like blue team tool you're using for detection and alerting, and see, okay, I know I executed that on 10.1.1.10, and let's go in there and see what kind of alerts it generated. Did it pop alerts? Great. If it did it block? Who knows? So we're going to try to do an example. We're going to try to do a demo here. Let's see how it goes. This is Windows VM. I turned some of the Windows security things off because they don't like it sometimes, which is good, I guess. I guess a win is a win, right? And Windows Defender has gotten a lot better over the years, so it's just for example here. So starting off, our first command that we would run here is a combination of this command and this one to install Atomic Red Team. So you can install this one on kind of any machine. I'm not going to install it here just because I did earlier. And so let's do it. The first one here is we're going to invoke Atomic for T1106. T1106 is, let's see, where is it listed here? I don't have it listed out. Execution through API. There you go. Execution through API has 5 different atomics underneath that right here. Dash show details brief will basically just show you which ones are available. So you can do all of them. It's not necessarily you could do all of them and it will just run them in order. Or we can do one example. So let's just take off the show details brief and we will tell it to run, let's try 2. Is it 2? -2. Please work. I think I had -1 as well. Please don't curse me. Okay, let's try. Let's try 1. Maybe that one failed. That's fine. It's because it was not connected to the internet. But hey, there you go. Hey, look, it's calculator. Please clap. The funny thing during the testing of this, during demo, something was borked with my Windows, and I didn't have calculator. I didn't know that was even possible. So I got calculator installed and it's working again. So I didn't even have Notepad. I don't know what that error was. That's weird. But anyways, so something like this, it will be a technique, and we can show the details if we wanted to. But what this will do is execute a mostly malicious or somewhat malicious, not that malicious script on your machine that will, in this case, pop an executable like calculator. And then from here, I could only make one enterprise network for this conference, so I don't have a separate blue team tool to show you. But if this was connected to a blue team tool, you would go in and say, okay, I'm looking for alerts on this machine. Should this have been blocked? maybe, depending on your situation. I would assume probably. If I was to turn some of the Windows security things on, I think it probably would have would have stopped it. But the thing really here is to make sure that we are being able to go back directly to the MITRE ATT&CK framework. This one, T1106-1, is a specific sub-technique, and this is something that an attacker could do on your network, right? We want to make sure that we are mapping these back and showing real value where we can. So let's go back to our slides here. So measuring effectiveness, right? Everybody here who works in a security field professionally probably has to track metrics. There's a reason we do it. It shows value. It shows that we are creating value or retaining value for our companies, and it's really important to be able to show constant improvement over time. Some example metrics, I actually do kind of care about metrics as much as I like to joke about it. It's important that we have meaningful metrics. I'm on this crusade about what counts as a meaningful pen test metric, and I've been doing it for years, and I think that I'm starting to form better opinions about it. Exactly. Coverage, not a great, not the best metric, but there are ways that we can track things. So, an example metric here that we might be interested on is detection rate, which is the percentage of attacks that are detected by your security system. So basically, of all of the techniques and sub-techniques, what percentage of them are going to be green or yellow? Which ones of these are going to be alerted on? Maybe it starts off at 5, then maybe a meaningful metric goal would be, hey, let's get to 10% by the end of the year. Response time taken from detection to response, showcasing the agility of the incident response team. This one's going to be priority based as well. Not every technique or sub-technique is going to matter the same amount. Something that pops calc probably maybe towards the higher part, some network discovery stuff maybe lower. So you're going to have a different response time per tactic or technique, and they can vary. So that one's not going to be like a global metric, but it's something that you could track. Framework coverage, the extent of techniques and tactics tested against the MITRE ATT&CK framework. You may have different detection rate versus the MITRE ATT&CK framework. MITRE ATT&CK framework is industry standard. Maybe you have different things in your own network that you care about that you want to track over time. And then attack outcome. So the effectiveness of the defense response measured by the ability to prevent or alert on simulated attacks. Just because you alerted on something doesn't mean you stopped it. Just because you were able to see something doesn't mean you alerted on it. Right, you're going to have blue teams responding in different ways depending on the type of technique and what it deserves. Right, not everything deserves a alert. Not everything deserves a block, but some do. So I care a lot about basically showing across an entire network, across an entire enterprise, what percentage of these things are blocked or alerted. If you have something that's supposed to be a global rule, like every machine in this network should definitely be alerting on this, and you only get 90% of your IPs come back with alerts, but you deploy the atomic to all 100%, then maybe you've got problems with 10% of your EDR. Maybe you have issues with some of the consistency of how you were deploying things. So a little bit more on alerting versus blocking. Again, like I just said, all blocking should generate alerts, but not all alerts lead to blocking. You want to be able to prove things historically as well. You want to be able to have timestamps for all of your alerts and your blocking, just so that you can go back and say, you can build a nice defense narrative about, hey, we blocked this thing at this time, but the attacks kept coming and then they eventually stopped. Now you can track those things historically over time and maybe build some more advanced detections. For example, colors are just kind of arbitrary. You can do them however you want. An example for this would be like red in that big chart that I was showing. Red could be no alerts, logs, or visibility. Orange could be inconsistent logs, no blocking. Yellow could be detailed logs, but again, no blocking. And green could be detailed logs, full automated blocking where necessary, right? It'll depend on tactic, and not all tactics warrant blocking, so you're going to have maybe different definitions based on tactic. Maybe, depends on your situation. Whatever makes sense to you. This is, I don't like global kind of this is the only way to do something advice. Everybody's organization's a little bit different, and they're going to care about different things, and they're going to be wanting to track things differently. And it may evolve over time, right? So a tool here that we're going to talk about briefly, there you go, is Vector. Vector is a free, not open source tool, closed source tool, but free tool that is available online for you to test a little bit of purple teaming. So we're all big into purple teaming here. This is it is like, again, Dan mentioned, I'm mentioning Dan's talk quite a bit, but purple teaming is basically a precursor to true red teaming. You're really not going to get to a point of doing real good true red teaming unless you have really worked with that blue team in the past and make sure that they are detecting things in a good way. So Vector, we'll show a demo here in a second for that, but it helps security teams track and improve their detection and response capabilities through attack simulations and purple team exercises. That's really where their goal is. There are other tools like this available online, but this is the one that we're going to be talking about today. Is it a glorified MITRE heat map? To some. Maybe to some, sure. With a little bit of extra tools. But I'm all about it, but I'm not married to it. This is just a tool. It's not my tool. So one thing that I want to talk about before we jump into the demo of that is engagements versus holistic overview, aka assessments versus campaigns in Vectorland. So on that MITRE heat map that I showed before, it was, you had a way to show green, red for all of these different things. But they did have, in the free online one, there's this concept of layers. But what you want to show over time is a multi-level heat map. So basically, during this engagement at this time, we tested this technique. It was yellow, and then maybe in the future it's green. Or maybe you have regressions. Maybe it was green, and then it's gone down to yellow. Why? Those are things that we need to track. But you can show, in Vector and other tools as well, a multi-level heat map of like the best you ever did. So if you have, across a bunch, you have 50 of them that are colored in some way, 25 of them are, yellow, and then you improve some of them over time, you will see, kind of your top level thing that shows you your coverage over time. It shows a story of continuous improvement, which is obviously important for all of us. We do want to be constantly making sure that we are scoring better and better every time. However, that is not always going to be true, especially if we swap tools, if we get into a situation where we add new systems onto our networks, new networks, anything that could maybe cause us to lapse a little bit. We need to basically be showing where over time, how our security posture is evolving. It'll explain gaps in coverage and allows for smaller iterative testing. You don't need to do a engagement that tests all of the, reconnaissance tactics in one engagement. That's a lot. There's going to be a lot there. Your blue team will probably be overwhelmed. It's probably not worth doing. You need to probably pick the ones that you care about the most, and those are the ones we tackle in the beginning, and then we improve over time. Once we're in a place where we feel comfortable about our detections and response, then we move on a little bit further. So let's see. I'm going to get to the Vector demo here in a little bit towards the end, just so it's a little bit more consistent. So one thing to talk about one thing that Atomic Red Team does really well is that we have the ability to deploy it to either one system or multiple systems. If you want to deploy it on a system that is not yours, it's built right into the tool. There's a thing that pulls session from PowerShell remoting. So if you have PowerShell installed, obviously on Windows, but you can also install PowerShell core on macOS and Linux and use this built-in remoting feature. You can send commands directly from a centralized computer off to another one to execute that atomic test in that way using the session that you have in PowerShell. You can do this different ways as well. If you want, if you want to, if you've got a network full of Temple OS, or you've got 60% of them are in Linux and 40% are Windows, 1% Mac, whatever. Then there are different ways, obviously, of pushing out these little scripts. They're just little scripts, right? You can use them and push them out via whatever deployment system that you're familiar with that you like, GPO, SCCM, straight up just SSH, SCP. If you have an integrated tool like Tanium or Ansible, something like that will be really cool to push it, and then you at least get knowledge you may get knowledge from that tool if you're using something special about how many of them executed or so on. So there is also another thing that Atomic Red Team that does that's pretty cool, which is adversary emulation. So you probably have heard of different types of adversary groups, different APTs, Fancy Bear, Cozy Bear, Lazarus, Double Dragon, whoever it is, right? A lot of times the people who are tracking these APTs over time will kind of build out attack chains that they use during a campaign, right? We know that there was a big breach of this system or breach of this company. In the report, they talked about all the things that that APT did. We can actually create essentially a CSV of all of the different attacks and then execute them in sequence. And then you can, if your blue team is really into tracking like adversary groups, then they can do something like creating alerts that take the type of behavior that those different types of atomics will create on systems, and then maybe create alerts saying like, this is something that has been, the type of behavior that is being alerted on has been seen by APTs such as Fancy Bear, what have you. So basically it's executing the atomics in sequence. They don't necessarily go immediately one after another. They can take time. APTs are not time bound. They are often, they take their sweet time. You can emulate whatever adversary group, or maybe you're your favorite adversary group. I think Ray's his favorite adversary group. And so you can build out these custom things, especially if you've seen something that your company has experienced over time. Like if maybe you had a big hack in your own company at one point and you want to build out an alert just to make sure they never come back. We can do something like that where you are creating these basically batches of atomics and creating an adversary emulation. So let's jump over to, I'm going to do a little bit of a purple team example here before that next slide. Over in Vector. So I have Vector running in the cloud. If you want to play around with it in the next couple of days, you can look at that IP address and go to it. It's just the standard Vector install. I'll tear it down in a couple of days. It's on GCP. But this is basically that tool. It looks very similar to what you saw before, but the cool thing to me at least is the purple teaming aspect. So let's just pick one of these. Let's see. Come on, Eversec CTF. Wireless network. Does that work? I may have to use my wife's hotspot on our phone. Come on. I blame Jeff. Yeah. So I'm going to try to talk to it as I get this going. So what is important? Let's see. Please work. Basically, well, I lost it. Okay, we'll do it live, people. There's my wife's. If the internet would work, I would play Jeopardy music while you all listen to this. Okay. Well, this is why you're supposed to take screenshots, but I did not. If this doesn't work, then we will just move right along. The point of this is that there is a... come on, Jeff. Meetings? Okay. Well, all right. Look away. Don't do this. That's all about 34 dot. All right, I think that's gone. We good? I'm just surprised that the Windows one worked. This is great. This is going. Yeah. Okay. Cool. All right. So there's vector. So the cool thing about vector is that it does provide like a purple teaming aspect to this whole thing that we've been talking about today. Please load. Demo gods, come on, y'all. It basically shows a way for red team and blue team to talk about the same tactic or technique and provide comments and provide basically the same thing that we showed in terms of we found something, we didn't, these are the notes that are on it, and then we actually can provide like gating. Come on, let's try it in Chrome. Sorry, y'all. Sorry, since the password is default, and the password is not. It's in my keychain. It's real bad. It's this one. Another cool thing that it does, which I probably don't have time to talk about, but it does show like actual industry level indices for different types of industry. So like fintech will have one, healthcare will have one. This is kind of like a gauge against what you should be doing. So I think are we good now? Yes. Okay. Great. So this is just a simple little web app that will show you basically what the red team did, and they can even provide timing. So like, we are actively doing this thing at this time. We stopped it, we paused it. We are using this technique in this phase. This is, maybe what the operator is doing at any given time. Maybe the red team itself has logs that they're executing that they can provide here, or evidence files for the blue team. And the blue team can come over here and they can say, okay, we blocked it and we alerted, or we blocked it or we alerted on it. Blocked, alerted, yes. Maybe the tool that we use, we can configure. We can say, on outcome notes that, maybe we got an alert, but the detail wasn't really great and we wanted to add more context, so we should do that later on. We should do that. We can be able to show the various endpoint protections and tag things and provide notes. Overall, nothing groundbreaking, not something that is so revolutionary, but it is a great way for us to track context over time, how we're improving, what tactics, techniques, and procedures we are protecting against, and collaborate. Exactly, right? Red and blue team work best together. You're really not going to get as much value as if red team is just going around trying to be sneaky all the time and avoid blue team, just because we typically work in the same company, so it is something that we should be working together on. So again, you can set different colors here and export them and so on and so forth. The environment, you can show a different assessment. Maybe we pick just these two, and we'll see it change over time, the various colors. Maybe this one wasn't good at one point and now it is. It's back into green, or it eventually gets to green. So just a simple tool. It's not a magic tool. It doesn't solve all your problems, but it definitely does give you a way for you to talk the same language with your red and blue team and get them working together. So does this replace red teams? Are we going to automate our jobs away? No, not really, especially not now. But this tool allows red teamers to be red teamers and not checkbox compliance robots. People get burnt out, people get bored when they are just checking the same things and not being able to be innovative. So creativity and innovation are not necessarily a part of these atomics. They just kind of do things that we've known about for a long time. Red trains blue, blue trains red, and we all become smarter and more effective because of it. So having people in the loop, I think, is obviously very important. It doesn't account for true evasion. Again, there are techniques that are not accounted for in these atomics that maybe just because you think it's green doesn't necessarily mean that every single attacker is going to be stopped by these tools. There is true evasion that can be done still. CVEs drop every day, probably more than we can keep track of anymore, but there are always going to be novel attacks that don't account for what's being said here. It provides no real strategic recommendations. Most of the time, these things are documented out, but for your environment specifically, a adversary or adversarial engineer or a red teamer is better at providing specific guidance for your company. They're going to have a level of insight that's going to be a little better than just general industry best practice. And then people can translate that business context, not graphs. You need to have somebody in the meeting who can put some thought behind the big heat map and say, just because it is 10% green, is that really a bad thing? Is that really something that we need to worry about? Probably not. That was what I just did. So there are some alternatives: Caldera by MITRE, Infection Money by Guardicore, Stratus Red Team by Datadog. There are things here that are good and bad depending on your situation. I would just keep a lookout. I heard somebody said that they were launching on some new one this week. So we've got exactly. So there are more coming out on the market. Things will change. Don't think that Vector is going to be the tool for you just because I talked about it here. Maybe you're fine with something as simple as the one provided by MITRE. So that's fine. There's no real need for you to invest in something just because it seems neat. But some things like maybe you're a very cloud-focused team, maybe Stratus Red Team by Datadog is the right solution for you. So looking forward, what is going to change about this in the near future? Yeah, AI. I had to mention it at some point. I don't think you can get through a talk these days in 2024 without mentioning it in some point. But I mentioned earlier, market conditions favor efficiency. This isn't always a bad thing. It sometimes is, but not always a bad thing. We are able to do a lot as red teamers without having to go through and get on every single machine and type out these scripts, or try to come up with spending a couple weeks on some new unique evasion technique. If we have atomics ready for us available, then we're able to do so much more. It increases there are increases in complexity of attacks. Like I said, those things are updated twice a year, so they change, and then atomics are updated as well. So just because you've been heads down on one part of the industry for a while doesn't mean everything has stayed the same. Things change, and sometimes it's better to just use other people's work than it is to try to train yourself again because something changed. More distributed ephemeral networks require automation. There is no way for somebody to go in and manually do an assessment on 10,000 endpoints, because by the time that you're done, it will have changed. And stuff comes up in the cloud, stuff comes down. We need automation. We need things at scale to be able to test our detections. And there's always a need for compliance proof when things come up in audits. You're going to want to be able to show some actual proof and some tracked metrics over time that you're improving and that you're working on certain types of detections and alerts. So that's it. That's the talk. Thank you so much.